Hello everyone. In this video we are working on the third skill of this course, and this skill will be the quiz skill with database integration. Alright, so as we talked about during the second skill building session, we have to follow certain things while making an Alexa skill. Now, one of the things that we need is a logic, right? Logic is a piece of code that does something, and even though we can use any server with HTTPS capability, AWS Lambda is a service that within AWS that's very easy to integrate with an Alexa skill. So we will be using AWS Lambda once again. The second component of an Alexa skill is an interaction model. Right? Interaction model is the model that will be used to interface for the users to interface with the backend, right? So it's like a model for communication. We need to set up the skill details. For example, the name of the skill, how we will call the skill, that kind of stuff. And finally, we need to test our skill, because if we don't test our skill, we don't know if it's working or not. So we'll go through each of these components before we can say that we successfully made a skill. Now the number 2, interaction model. The interaction model is you could say it's like the front end of the Alexa skill, right? Just like you go to a web page and you click on various menus and all the options, drop downs, that sort of stuff. In Alexa, since it's voice operated, since it's a voice interface, you need to have the similar kind of navigation system through voice, and the interaction model helps us achieve that. So on the left side we have intents. So in the interaction model, we will have intents, meaning what we can do with the skill. So my skill, or my Alexa skill, can have only one intent. I can have 5 intents, or I can have 100 intents. I can have any number of intents. There could be a limit. I haven't tried it, but there you can add as many intents as you want. Now the slots, we'll look at these things in the actual developer console, so it'll be easier to understand then. But just to give you an idea, slots are connected to intents because my intent could have 4 slots, right? So if my intent was that, for example, if my intent was I like to eat, right? I like to eat, or I like to order. That's my intent, order intent, right? So the slots could be, if this skill was a restaurant skill, it could be the menu items in the restaurant. So if you don't have all the foods out there, if you only have, if your restaurant specializes on, let's say, pizza and pasta, right? You only have 2 food available to order. You don't even offer anything else. No drinks, nothing, only pizza and pasta, and not even water. Let's say you get the water for free every time, right? So if my intent was to order, I could either order pizza or pasta or both, right? So in that case, my slot will have 3 values. My slots will have, my food slots will have 3 options. either pizza, pasta, or both. And how sample utterances is related to intents is that many people, order in different ways, right? I could say, for example, if my intent was to order pizza, I could say, I want a pizza, right? I could also say, I like to have a pizza, or I could say pizza. There's many ways to say the same thing. So sample utterances are just different ways of calling an intent, right? So in that way, intent, slots, and sample utterances are connected to each other. Now, for the backend, though, we just talked about the interaction model, which is like the front end of the skill, right? We interact through that template, through that model. Now, Lambda is on the back end doing the actual work. Like this is where I can use many languages, like JavaScript, Python, Go, Java. In this case, we will be using Python, and you can do just about anything by writing code. So if you, it's just like at this point your skill is capable of doing anything that a code on your computer can do. If a program on your computer can do. So you can call APIs to get information, or you can return a specialized message. You can do many things, right? At this point, it's up to the developer to include what he wants in the backend that matches up with the skills function. And finally, after we set up the front end and back end properly, right, we need to test our skill and hopefully publish the skill on the Alexa app store, so skill store. So one great thing about developing for Alexa is that if you have your Amazon Echo device set up, then as soon as you build the skill, you can start testing right away, right? Now, building and publishing is two different things. Publishing means that you have to certify your skills, and you have to submit for certification to Amazon, and they will test your skills and they'll find bugs. They'll give you feedback if you haven't followed certain guidelines or haven't fulfilled some requirements, and all you have to do is to address whatever issues they've found and resubmit. And at that point, after you resubmit and when they certify your skill, other people can use that as well. So before the certification, only you can test it. After the certification, you can let other people test it too or use it. So that's how it is. We'll be following these things when we are making the app, the skill. Now let me go to the developer console, right? Once again, quickly, the number one logic is on AWS Lambda. So you will need an AWS account for the first point. Now the second point is that you need the developer account. So it's two different accounts, and you will need to sign up for both of these. Hopefully you already have it set up. So first of all, I'm going to go to my developer.amazon.com account, sign up with your email, and you should get something like this. At this point, I'm going to click on Alexa, and we'll choose Alexa Skills Kit. Okay, so all right, so I have a quiz that is live. Now this is the skill that I built for this lesson, World Quiz. And before we go into this quiz itself, I want to get started with building a new skill from scratch one more time, right? So once you go to your developer.amazon.com and you click on Alexa, you'll go to this page, click on add a skill right here. Now in here, you put your information, leave everything in the first section default because we want to build a custom interaction model. Language is English. Name is going to be my quiz, right? Or now this is the name that customers will see when they're browsing the skills in the skill store. So you might want to have it something, I don't know, not so generic as my quiz. It could be something like, I don't know, sports quiz or world quiz. As you saw in the previous window, I had mine named world quiz. So I'm gonna say, we're gonna use the one that I built already. So I'm just gonna say world quiz again. Invocation name is the name you use to call this on Alexa device. So when you say Alexa, start world quiz, and it will start your skill. So it could be world quiz or my quiz or whatever. I'm gonna say world quiz as well. All right, so for audio player, I don't need an audio player. Video app, it's not a video app. Render template, I don't need to render a template. So I'm just gonna say save. At this point, I can move on to the interaction model. Now this was the old way of doing things, right? Doing things. 1 box, 2 box, and 3 box. Number 3. I made some skills the old way, but I really like the new way, which is right here, launch skill builder beta. So try the skill builder, an intuitive interface for building your interaction model and creating dialog prompts. And I really do agree with this. It's very intuitive compared to the old way. So we're going to click on this. So now this is the new way of doing things, and as you can see, it's already looks great. Now it's very intuitive, and let me show you how. So as you can see, the intent is right here, 3 built-ins. There's always going to be 3 built-in intent, right? Now let's go back to the PowerPoint, right? In the interaction model, we have intent, slots, and sample utterances, right? So let's build an intent, right? One intent that I want to have is, I will take you to create a new custom intent. I'm going to say start intent because I want to start the quiz, right? Create intent. Now immediately after you create, you'll be taken to the sample utterances window. And this is where we say, like the example I provided, I want a pizza, or I want to eat a pizza, or pizza, how about pizza, something like that. So I could say start quiz. I could also say start only if I'm feeling lazy, or I could say I want to play or I want to start a quiz, right? These are the way that I can ask Alexa to start a quiz. So the intent will be always mapped to the utterances. I could say any of these things and the start intent will be called. Now the actual logic part happens in Lambda. We'll look at that later in the video, but for now we're just setting up the model, right? That's why it's called an interaction model. So we just set up our first intent. That's it. So the next intent will be to answer a question, right? So whenever the quiz will ask me a question, what's the name of the capital of the United States? What's the capital of the United States? Choice A, Washington DC. Choice B, Seattle. Choice C, New York. And I'm going to say A, Washington DC. So that's what that intent is what we want to create now. So before we create the intent, let's talk about slot types, right? So a slot is is for exactly this kind of intent where you have 3 different options. You can create a slot and you can expect people to say one of the items in the slot. So if I go down here in slot types and if I click on add, the name of the new slot type will be choice. Create a slot type. Now the slot values will be either A, B, or C. No D, no E, no F, no 1, no 2, no 3. Just A, B, and C. That's it, right? Now, let me go back to the intent section and add an intent. Right now, in this time I want to say the intent name will be answer intent. Create intent. The sample utterances. Now, check this out. So before I had, start a quiz, start like that, but now I want to have something like my choice is A. But this this is not the right way to this is not the right way, because you could the way to do it when you have different choices that you want to limit between A, B, and C is you create a curly bracket and you say choice, or since we have that, my choice is choice, right? So in the next one I'm gonna say choice. So what this does is this will just say I'm just choosing a choice. If I just say A, then this should fulfill the answer intent. So once again I'm going to add my choice is, and see, it gives me an option since we created this here. So my choice is choice. Now over here in the intent slot under choice, I wanna come down and make sure it's choice. So right, choice. So make sure you do this step, otherwise it won't be connected to this. As you can see, this is this and this now are connected, right? So choice type. So just to give you a better idea, choice type is the one we made here. Choice is right here, right? The one we just made for the intent. We mapped with intent. So yeah, so we can either say choice or we can say my choice is choice, or I could say the answer is choice, right? So at this point what happens is that I can only say when I say my choice is, then Alexa will be expecting either A, B, or C, right? The answer is A, B, or C. When I say A, B, or C, it'll automatically map to the intent because I set it up this way. So I hope this makes sense. Now what we'll do is we'll move on to this thing called code editor. We have a lot of other intents, and I'll show you all the intents we have just in a few minutes. But before, let's move on to the code editor. Right? If I move on to the code editor, now as you can see, a nice JSON document of all the intent slots and utterances will be here. So the first thing we'll see is the choice type slot types, and there'll be a value A, value B, value C. Then there will be intent for Amazon cancel intent. This was default. Help intent default. Stop intent default. And the answer intent will have 2 sample utterances. Looks like the third one didn't get saved. Anyways, so answer intent can have 2 sample utterances. In this case, it says samples, and the slots will be of type choice type. So that means you can have either A, B, or C, just like here, right? So the next intent will be start intent. I can say either start quiz start, or I want to start a quiz to start a quiz, and the invocation name is also here. It's world quiz. Now you have the idea of the interaction model. I want to go back to the interaction model that I on the skill that I have submitted and published, right? So if I go to the code editor, as you can see, I have 7 intents here, right? We both have cancel, help already, and we also have answer and start. Now in this case, I added resume and pause, right? Resume and pause intent. Now this will come in handy when we want to pause our progress, and all you have to do is, there's no slots in this. All I have is pause quiz and pause for the sample utterances, and for the resume the quiz and resume. So I don't want to type this all over, so you get the idea. You just add as many intents as you want. So we are done with the intent. Obviously I will provide the code on the code editor, so that you can just paste this and get started, or bonus points if you do it yourself and create all the intents. That's how it's we encourage you to do. Try to build it yourself, just like we showed you. And now let's move on to the Lambda part of the function. So console.aws.amazon.com, this is the AWS Lambda console. So once again, after you sign into AWS, what you do is you go to services. In here you search for Lambda, right? And I have all these functions. Now this is the one that I have, ASM quiz, right? This is the one I have for our quiz. Now as you can see, there's a lot of code in here, almost 400 lines of code. And yeah, let's just start with, it's easy to get confused in this code. So I want to get started with showing you once again how a Lambda works. A Lambda function works, right? So if I were to create a new Lambda function, just test function, and since we're using Python, let's always select Python 2.7. Create a choose an existing role. Now we also talked about role, so in this case I will have admin. I want to give it an admin access just for ease, but it's always best practice to give only the amount of access that you need, not excess access. So for this demo, I'll give it an admin access. So create a function, right? Okay, so if I create a function, right, every Lambda function in Python has this structure. Define a method of Lambda, define a function of Lambda handler, event, context, and return something, do something, right? So this is how a typical Lambda function is set up. So you see this Lambda handler. Since Lambda is triggered by an event, right? Lambda needs to be triggered by an event, so I need to add a trigger. And whatever the trigger I set up, for example, in this case, it will be our Alexa skills kit, right? When I select the skills kit as a trigger for this function, what happens is that it will put something on the if you go back to the function that we have, right here, it will send us an event, right? So we will get an event, and from that event we can access our intent and all those stuff, right? So an Alexa event will have the intent name and the slot values, how we set up, we'll look at that a little bit later. But that's how a typical Lambda function is. Any Lambda function in Python is set up like this. Define Lambda handler. Obviously you can change the name of the handler to anything else, but this is the standard Lambda handler. Event context, return something. Now when we go back to our function, we obviously have a lot of code in here, but all the way down here somewhere, right here, as you can see, main handler, define Lambda handler event context, just like here, right? But in this case we have a lot more thing going on, but the idea is the same, right? We receive an event from Alexa skills kit, and according to what we get, we return something, right? And since we have a application that can do many things, we have a lot of lines of code. So let's start with the Lambda handler, right? This is where Alexa will first contact our Lambda, right? So once we get an event from Lambda, now this print, every time you see print is, it's for testing and it's for debugging purposes, logging purposes. It's really not affect anything on the response you get or response you hear. Now you have some. Now I copied a part of this. I used a template provided by Amazon to get started on this skill. So there are some comments that I wanted to show you that might be helpful. So right here, since we already talked that this is not so important, so uncomment this if statement and populate with your skills application ID to prevent someone else from configuring a skill that sends request to this function. So at this point, anyone can send a request to this function. Anyone can use my function ARN and send a request to this function, right? So it would be a good idea to go back to my application ID. Oops. So I think this is my application. So skill information. So this is the application ID, right? So I'm gonna copy this and gonna go back here, and I'm gonna copy I think I need to do this. I have actually never tried this. Anyways, this is something to you know, be mindful of, that you can do this. I've never had the reason to do this yet, so I left this here just so that you know that there is an option. And the other thing is, by default, anyone can use your code for their application. So after that, this is optional, obviously. So if event session new, right? So at this point, it's looking at event and it's looking for the value of session and if it's new or not, right? So if it's saying if it's a new session, start on session started function, route to this function. So at this point, if we go up and check on session started right here, oops, then as you can see, all it does is it's printing something. So really not that important, right? So, and like I said again, I got this from Amazon's template and I built on top of it. So there's a lot of things that are not so important, but it's the way they do it is like a good practice to do, because it separates different functions and does things the way they want. And since they are building this whole thing, it's always a good idea to see how they do it, right? So let's move on to the second if statement. So if event request type is launch request, right? So if I launched, if the intent was, or if the request type is launch, then return on launch. Right, now let's go and check what's on the on launch function. Right here, it's printing something, right? Not important. You could, in fact, whenever I say not important, you can actually delete that line and there'll be no effect on anything. But it's good to have that print statement, because it's, when we check the logs, it's easier to troubleshoot sometimes, So I like to keep that statement, but it's really not required. So that when I say this function is 400 lines of code, you could trim it down to maybe 250 lines of code, but if you remove all the excess stuff. But it would be a good idea to keep some of the print statements for logging purposes, and we'll look at logging later on the video. So now, except for the print, we have a return statement, right? It's returning me this another function. So get welcome response, it's passing on session. So let's go and look up for this get welcome response function. It's going to be all the way up. Here. So, oops. So right here. So the card title. We'll start with the card title. So the card title is something that you will see on your phone, on your Alexa skill application when you launch when you are interacting with your Alexa skill, right? It's a good way to kind of see what's happening visually on a screen. Now this will be if you have a Echo device with a screen, then your card title will display that stuff on the actual device. But if you just have a Echo Dot or Echo with no screen, then whenever you see card title or card output, something like that, it's going to be on your mobile application. So this will be when you start a session, we'll have a card, and card is just a section of, like image and words. So card title of welcome, you'll see a word welcome on your mobile phone if you go into the skill Alexa app, right? So now response, now here I'm checking for a paused step. Right now, why I'm doing this is because if someone had paused a quiz session before he ended the quiz, the first thing I do when a user starts the skill is check for the paused step, right? Now for that, obviously I have to go and check what's happening on the check paused step, right? So I'm gonna go a little bit down. Right here. So check pause step, what I'm doing is I'm going to a DynamoDB table. Right, this is how you access the DynamoDB table. DynamoDB is a database in Amazon Web Services. Table equals client.table skill. I have let me go to my DynamoDB. So DynamoDB, and we'll go over this in details in other sessions. So in my tables, I have a table named skill, and that has some items, right? So so if I go back, then all this function is doing is it's going to that table named skill, and it's getting the user ID of the user that's using the skill by checking the session user and user ID, and I've commented that right here, right? DynamoDB get the user ID of the current user. So whoever is using the skill, it will get the user ID of that person. And as you can see in this table, the account means the user ID, right? These are the user ID, and it will look for the matching user ID, and and it will retrieve it will get the right here. So response is going to be this. So it will get the item, and it will get the paused question. Right now, the paused question is somewhere right here. So people have been pausing their question. So if there's a paused question on the database, then it will return the paused question, right, as a count. The variable for the paused question is count, right? Now if there's nothing, then it will return 0, right? If the user has just started using the skill, then there's not going to be any count, so it's going to return 0. So the pause step is there. Now let's go back all the way to the get welcome response. All right, so if paused check is 0, right, then that means that there's no paused question. So at that point, the speech output will be welcome to the quiz, say start to start the quiz. The reprompt text is something that will be said if you don't say anything in 4 seconds after you hear the speech output. Every time you only have 8 seconds to answer a question to Alexa, and if you don't answer within 8 seconds, then the session will be ended. So reprompt text is said after 4 seconds when you don't say anything. So this, if the pause check is 0, then this will happen. So what if there is a pause step, right? So let's say that when I check the paused after the pause checked, if I receive the number as 1, as you can see, if someone has a saved question number 1 on the step 1 or number 1, then it says welcome to the quiz. You have a saved quiz, right? So you get an option if you want to resume the saved session. So if you want to resume the saved session, say resume or say restart, right? That's an option you'll get. So you can either say resume or restart, right? So this line of code, should end session, is false. Now why this is false is because if I say should end session equals true, then immediately after I say something to Alexa, the session will be ended. I want to keep the session open and keep the interaction going on. So should end session equals false. And finally, we're returning something. Return a function build response, session attributes, build speechlet response, card title, speech output, reprompt text, should end session. So if you look carefully in here, there's a function, right? Actually a function inside a function. So for this, we will need to look at build speechlet response function somewhere up here, right here. So all this is doing is returning, when I pass in these values, it's just returning a JSON, like a dictionary format of all the things that I pass. So output speech is going to be plain text of text output. Card is going to be type simple. Title is going to be the title that I supply. Content is going to be the output. Reprompt is going to be the reprompt text. Should end session is should end session. And build response is I'm only returning the version, session attributes, and response. And the response is speechlet response, right here. So if I go down to the get welcome response, right here, what I'm doing is I'm passing the session attributes. The session attributes here will be nothing in case that it's a new session. If it's a paused session, then you will have a pause check in retrieved score, right? So once I pass the session attributes and I pass all the card title, speech output, reprompt text, should end session, at that point Alexa will talk me back with the speech output. So it could be either this or it could be either this. So if it's a new session, I'll get this, welcome to the quiz. Say start to start the quiz, or welcome to the quiz. You have a saved quiz, and at this point, I say either start or resume. Now, since we're just starting this function, we haven't looked at anything else. Let's say that I choose, if I say start, right? Now, if we go back to our skill builder, when I say start, it means that I chose the start quiz intent. See how this works out? So if I say start or new quiz or start a quiz or start quiz, then start quiz intent will be called. Now let's go back to our Lambda function. Now for that, we have to come all the way down here, right? Now this time, when I talk back to Alexa, we'll come back to the Lambda handler one more time. And since it's a launch request, well, it's a intent request, right? I'm saying start. What happens is it will return on event request, event session. So I want to check the on event function. So on event is, actually I think it's on intent. Yeah, on intent. So on intent function. So on intent is right here, right? On intent, since I chose start quiz intent, as I showed you right here, start quiz intent, it's right here. Else if intent name equals start quiz intent, then return start quiz intent session. So I want to go back all the way to start quiz function right here, and at this point I'm saying response equals get answers 0, right? So I'm calling another method to get the answers. So for this I have to go all the way up to get answers function and see that it's returning. What it does is it will return me the response, and the response is all answers. The all answers is a string that's a combination of all the possible answers that have been shuffled, right? So I've used random.shuffle. Let me show you the answers first. So this is the answers, right? For every question there's 3 different answers. And the way I wrote all the answers and the way you should write all the answers is the right answer is always on the first index 0. But if someone was to play the quiz, and if he always got the same, the first answer, it won't be interesting. He can always guess. He can always say the first choice is the right answer, and it's going to be right. So that I've imported a random, this thing called random, that will help me to shuffle these answers. And what I've done here is on the get answers, I've said random. Well, first of all, shuffle answer equals answer of num. So I'm saying now num is the number of the index of the answer, right? So random.shuffle answer, and I'm shuffling the answers. I'm adding all of it to the answer questions. All answers string right here, and I'm returning, right, all answers. But at the same time, I'm also returning after shuffle choice. Now this will come in handy when we want to know the right answer, because let me show you. So not only when I when I'm looping through the answers, the shuffle answers, and I'm adding that to the string all answers, I'm also checking that if the current answer that's being shuffled is, is the answer on index 0. If it is, then I will save the index to the variable after shuffle choice. So at this point, I'm returning not only the answers that I shuffled, I'm also returning the index of the answer that's right after being shuffled. And this will come in handy when I check for the answer. Now let's go back. So when I say start quiz, the response will be get answers of 0, because it's the first time I'm starting the quiz. It's obviously going to be 0, and it's going to give me the shuffled. So when I say answer equals response 0, I'm saying this is the string that contains the answer, and response 1 means the correct answer index, right? So I have these two things, and speech output is going to be, all right, first question, get the question 0. If I go up to the get question, then get question just returns the question, and the questions is right here. Questions equals who is the author of Sherlock Holmes novel, right? So I don't need to shuffle that. So let's go down, and it's gonna return me, first question, who's the author of this, and give me the choice of answers, right? So at this point, it will also pass in the current question, because we want to keep track of the current question. Because if I don't track stuff in the session, then the next time I come back to Lambda, it's still going to be question number 0, right? So I need to keep track of it, and I do that with session attributes. And the way I set it up here is session attributes. I'm adding shuffle choice to be the shuffle choice right here, and current question is to be 0, score to be 0, because I haven't answered and gotten anything right. So once again, should end session is false, reprompt text is none, because I'm just saying something, I'm stating something, and I'm expecting for answer. So return, right, I'm returning everything else. Now the next, so at this point, my thing is to select an answer, right? So let's go back to our interaction model. So answer intent. At this point, I can say either just A, B, or C, or my choice is A, B, or C, or the answer is this and this and this. So when I say, for example, A, right? When I say comes back to the Lambda handler one more time, since it's an intent, it'll go to the on intent. On the on intent, this time it's the answer intent, right? So it's going to be answer intent. It's going to return answer question method, right? So we're going to go to this answer question function. So this one is a long one, a lot of logic in here, right here. So answer question, the card title is answer, session attributes. It's going to be the session attributes. Now this is where we pull in the thing that we passed earlier, right? The things that we kept track of. We kept track of, it's right here. So we kept track of shuffle choice, current question, and score, and we're pulling that right over here, right? We're pulling those things right here. So should end session is obviously false. Now choice, right? Choice is going to be the intent, slots, choices, value. What this means is that from the intent, from the slots, from the choices slots that I created earlier, right? I'm getting the value of that choice. So it's either A, B, or C at this point. Now I'm printing this for troubleshooting, and I also commented that can't delete this line. So now right answer is going to be the session attributes that I have here and shuffle choice. Now see, back before in the last function when I saved the shuffle choice, it was either A, B, or C. Now when a user selects a choice A, B, or C, I'm comparing them to see if both of them match. Now if both of them match, then it's the right answer, right? So once again, print. No, I'm converting the right answer to lowercase with this. I want to have both of them lowercase so that it's easy to compare. Shuffle choice once again is empty. So choice is going to be choice of 0, right? So this is because sometimes I get whenever I say choice, I'll get something like this, A dot, right? So choice of 0 in this case is just A, so that I don't get dot, right? So that's why I used only the first character of the choice. Once I have that, right, I'm getting the user ID. We'll use this a bit later. But anyways, at this point we're comparing the choice.lower. So the choice.lower is once again the choice that the user gave. If it's equal to the right answer dot lower. Right answer is session attribute shuffle choice that we looked at earlier. Now if they match, then score is going to be +1, right? Because I answered the question right. Current question, right, is going to be current question. And I'm also going to add 1 to the number of current questions. So the current question is going to increase by 1. So I don't know why I have this. This is redundant. I don't think I need this, but anyways, let's move on. If current question is more than number of questions, -1, right? So if now this is just checking that to make sure that everything is properly, it's not going out of bounds, right? So I'm just saying that response will be get answers of the current question. So the answer at this point will be response of 0, just like before. Shuffle choice will be response of 1. If current question is less than number of question, -1. Speech output correct. Next question. Now this line of code is to check if the current answer is either the current question is either the last question or not, right? So if it's not, is less than or equal to, right? So if it's not the last question, then it's gonna say correct, next question, and give you the next question. If it's the last question, we don't have a next question, right? So we want to say correct, you scored this much, and at this point should end session will be true because we're done with the quiz. All right, I've given them the score, we're done with the quiz. Now else if is when there's no match between the answered choice and the correct choice. Then it's you don't have a score added, right? So that we do the same thing, but we don't add the score, and we're also checking that if it's the last question or not. So if it's not the last question, we're just saying wrong, next question, we're giving the next question, and we're printing, and the speech output is going to be this. Now else, finally, if you answered wrongly, and if the question is the last question wrong, you scored 3 out of 5. And obviously if it's a last question, I reset the session. A reset means just that I'm setting the paused question to 0, so that next time I open the quiz, the paused question is 0, because I finished the quiz, so I haven't paused anything. So if there was a paused session somewhere, I'm resetting it. And we have a function that for reset right here. So when I call the reset function, I'm just saying paused question is 0 on the DynamoDB table, right? So paused question will be converted to 0. Anyways, so the answer question will be running until we get to the last question, right? Now we have few of the things that we need to check, right? So whenever we, you can only get a high score if you answer the last question right, correct? Because if you answer the last question wrong, then obviously you don't have the high score. So I have a mechanism to check the high score, like a universal high score. So for that, what I have done is, now this might be a little bit advanced for this course, but I just have, if you want to include this, then you are welcome to. You don't have to worry about this. But anyways, the high score I've tracked it globally. Everything else is for each account, right? Paused question, count, saved score. But the high score is for globally, right? The high score is 6. I only have 6 questions on the quiz now, so the high score is 6. So when someone answers the last question right here, right? If choice equals right answer, when they answer the last question properly, then I check right here. So high score text equals check high score, right? So whenever they answer the last question right, I'm checking if they got the high score. And if they got the high score, then I'm adding that text to after you scored 3 out of 5. Well, if they scored 3 out of 5, then I'm checking for high score text. If the high score text is, if you haven't scored a high score, then high score text will be empty. So this will just be this, the output will be only this. But if you scored a high score, then you get, that's a high score, and it'll be added to the end of your speech output. So that's basically the answer question. So at this point, we have few other things to look at before we can move on to the troubleshooting part. So the pause intent, just like we looked at before, will take us here. All the pause intent is doing is it's saving, it's finding the user ID right here. It's going into the table, and it's pulling the paused question from the session attributes, and it's setting the saved score paused question to paused question. So at this point, we'll go to the Dynamo DB table, and paused question will be 1, 2, 0, whatever. It's obviously not going to be 0. So anyways, should end session is true, and when you pause, your progress was saved. Come back and resume anytime, and that's basically it. And there's few other methods here and there that integrate with all the big response with the quiz. So that's how I set up the quiz. Obviously, we are going to talk more about each and every single part in detail during the course, in other videos or in the classroom. So at this point, let's move on to troubleshooting, right? So every time you call the function, what happens is there's no way to check what happened from this window. But what you can do is you can go to monitoring, and you can click on anything. Click on one of the jump to logs or jump to metrics. I'm gonna say this one. It's gonna take you to CloudWatch Management Console, and it'll show you all streams. You click on the second from the last right here, and these are the times that someone called my function, right? So the last time someone called my function, I can look into here, and this is where all the print statements that I put in the code come in handy. First of all, they give me an idea of what executed and what didn't execute. So if I, just for, let's say, when I say print something, right? When I say print capacity, this is for testing, and like all the print statement, like this one, these are the choices, all these are the print statement, and even these are, I printed them so that I see them here, otherwise they shouldn't be here. So that's why print statement is useful to troubleshoot, and basically you just troubleshoot here. So if you were to say something that didn't work, then you'll get to see an error here. So let me try to see if I can find any errors right here. So this one was an error, and as you can see, list indices must be integers, not decimal. So this was one of the errors that I got, and I moved back to my function and I changed that. I made that to a decimal. So this is how you troubleshoot, right? Once again, CloudWatch, troubleshoot the CloudWatch. Now finally, once you have everything, and once you have saved the model, so once we'll provide you with the code to paste over here, and once you paste the code, these things, then you should be able to save model. After you save the model, you click on build model, and after that you can click on test. Now, one word of caution to testing in the test simulator. This is a custom. This is a new feature that just came out last month in December 2017. So it's a very new feature, and it's still in beta version. So it might be buggy, and I've experienced that it doesn't work out perfectly all the time, right? So the best thing to do will be to test on your device itself. So at this point, once you save everything, you should be able to go to your device, and if you have set it up with your Alexa app in your mobile phone and paired it with your device, and you should be able to start testing right away. So at this point, it's not letting me do the test simulator because I've already submitted this skill. But this is how you build a skill, and in the next video we will test this skill. Thank you for watching, and we'll have more videos to go with this video explaining things in more detail. If you have any questions, write them in the comments. Ask us the question in the classroom, or in email, or comments. Thanks again. See you soon.